Alright, we're going to calculate the percent composition by mass of a hydrate, and this is an important topic. It's covered when we do the copper 2 sulfate hydrate lab. So on one of these examples that I'm going to give you, I'm going to show you how to calculate the percent composition by mass of the water in the copper 2 sulfate hydrate. We're going to use the same formula as we did in the last video. If you haven't watched the calculating percent composition by mass video, go ahead and do that. Again, I took a quick picture of the percent composition by mass formula that's on table T. So if you forget where it is, you can go ahead and go look it up. Keeping in mind that when I write it down, I always like to keep things nice and short and simple and write part over whole times 100. Works exactly the same way as when we were calculating the percent composition of a single element in a compound. Alright, so for the copper 2 sulfate pentahydrate example, we're going to calculate the gram formula mass of the salt and the gram formula mass of the 5 waters separately. And I'm just going to go ahead and do that. If you haven't watched the calculating gram formula mass video, I did this example on that video, so you can watch it, but I will just do it real quick here so you can see what the answer is. So all I did was calculate how many copper, sulfur, and oxygen I have, and then I wrote in the 3 atomic masses, and I multiplied them through, and then quickly I'm just going to add them together and get 160 grams per mole. I went ahead and I calculated the gram formula mass for 1 water molecule, and as you can see, it is 18 grams per mole. But we have 5 water molecules, so we're going to multiply that by 18. 18 times 5 gives us 90 grams per mole. Now you can see I have 160 grams for my salt, 90 grams for my water. This is the salt, this is the water. If I add them together, 160 plus 90 equals 250 grams per mole total. That's for the hydrated salt. Alright, let's go ahead and find the percent that is water in the copper 2 sulfate pentahydrate. And then we always start with our formula, part over whole times 100. The part that I am looking for is the the water. We're going to do the water first because we're looking for the part that is water. So the part is 90. Ooh, I'm writing in yellow. I don't know how that happened. Okay, 90. And we're going to go over the whole thing, which is 250 times 100. And you should end up with 36% water. So if you were to buy this, 36% of what you're buying is going to be water. And what percent would be the salt? Well, there's 2 ways to calculate this. We can figure out that if we have 100%, which is the CuSO4, the copper 2 sulfate with the waters attached, and we subtract the part that is water, which was 36%, that's the water, what we are going to have left is going to be the copper 2 sulfate, which is just the salt, and that would give us 64% salt. Or we can actually do the calculation again. We could do percent of copper 2 sulfate. So I wrote it down here. Percent copper 2 sulfate is part over whole times 100. The part that was copper 2 sulfate was 160 grams per mole. The whole thing was 250 grams per mole times 100. And you will end up with 64% CuSO4, which is what we should get. So we got 36% was the water, plus 64% was the copper 2 sulfate, and we will end up with 100%, which is the entire hydrate. This is the hydrated crystal. Okay, for the very last example for calculating the percent of water, we're going to calculate the percent of water in barium chloride trihydrate. We're going to quickly just do the gram formula mass for both parts. So barium chloride is made of a barium and a chlorine, There's 1 barium and 2 chlorines. The barium weighs 137, the chlorine weighs 35 or 35.5, depending on if you're rounding to the nearest tenth. 137 and 70 gives us 207 grams per mole for the salt portion of the barium chloride trihydrate. We'll move that to the side and we'll deal with the water portion. So we've got H2O, you've got 2 H's and 1 O. Each H weighs 1 gram, each oxygen weighs 16. This should become routine after a while because you always know that water is 18 grams per mole. You've got 3 waters at 18 grams per mole. That is 54 grams per mole for the water portion. So we end up with 207 grams of the barium chloride. And we have 54 grams of the water. So the total for the entire thing is 261 grams per mole. Now that we have these numbers, we can figure out the percent of water, which I'm going to do on the next page. Okay, here we are. I rewrote it for us. So the percent of the water is going to be the part that is water over the whole thing times 100. Don't be a lazy bones. Write out your formula. Change the color to make it happy. We'll do the water portion, which was 54 grams per mole, over the whole thing, which was 261 grams per mole. For those of you who are following units, the grams per mole divided by grams per mole is going to cancel, and you're going to end up with 21% water. Okay, so if you're going to buy 430 grams of this barium chloride trihydrate, how much of the 430 grams would be water? Well, we just calculated on the previous page that we had 21%, which was water, which means we're going to have 79%, which is going to be the barium chloride. If we take 21% of the 430 grams, we will know how much water we had in grams. 0.21%, or percent divided by 100, so 21% over 100 is what we are looking for, 430 grams. So 21 divided by 100 is 0.21 times 430 is going to equal the amount of grams that you would have in water. Approximately 90.3 grams of this sample would be water. Can you figure out how much would be the salt? Right, if you started out with 430 grams and 90.3 grams of it was water, then 339.7 grams would be the barium chloride. Think of it this way. If you had a circle, let's see if I can draw a circle, okay, and that represented the entire 430 grams, and 21% of it was water, and the other 79% of it was the salt, then you could visualize this was the salt portion over here, and this was the water portion. Out of that 430 grams, you would have 90.3 grams that is water, and 339.7 grams that is salt.